I'm Natalia Bilbao, and this is LA Currents. When we think about examples of sustainable cities, Los Angeles may not be the first one that comes to mind. Known for its droughts, high temperatures, and dense traffic, some people even refer to it as a concrete jungle. But despite this widely spread conception, can Los Angeles become the world's most sustainable megacity by 2050? To talk about this and other sustainability goals and projects, I'm excited to be joined by Cassie Rouser, Executive Director of the UCLA Grand Challenge in Sustainability. Thank you so much for being here, Cassie. So tell us a little bit about how this whole idea came to fruition, how the conception started.
So the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge at UCLA was actually conceptualized before I was here. So back in 2012, it was really the brainchild of Michelle Popowitz in the Vice Chancellor for Research Office, and she and her colleague were really inspired by the type of work that Peter Diamandis was doing and is doing with the X Prize. And so the idea really is to identify a challenge or a problem, a societal need, and then to work together to coordinate folks from a number of different disciplines and different expertise around solving the problem. And the reason that they selected sustainability is because it's one of the strengths that we have here at UCLA. And obviously sustainability is a great need in the region, and UCLA wanted to make sure that we were having a real meaningful impact right here in our own backyard.
I love that, in the backyard.
Yep.
It's huge, but yes, in the backyard. So how did you professionally become involved in the project, and how did you come to hold this current position?
So once they developed the idea around the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge, which was around the areas of water, of energy, and of ecosystems, they realized that they really needed someone to come in and help move the project along and to coordinate things, and that now they had this great idea, but how were they going to execute it? So I actually knew Michelle Popowitz professionally because I worked at the University of California, Irvine, and I was working in research development. My background is also in ecology and evolutionary biology, so I have a research background in that space. And combined with that, she remembered in meeting me at a professional meeting that I had lived abroad in Costa Rica doing environmental work and working in conservation and sustainability. So she thought, you know, this might be the woman to run our project. So they called me up, and a cold call, and said, we're doing this thing at UCLA. We want to make LA sustainable, and we think you should come in and do that for us. And I started laughing. Actually, I started laughing, and I was like, yeah, good luck with that.
That's funny.
I'm not from Los Angeles. I'm not from Southern California, but I've lived most of my adult life here. And so what I knew of Los Angeles was, you know, what you mentioned at the beginning. You know, it's a concrete jungle. You know, there's no hope. There's so much traffic. And so, you know, that, excuse me, that's why I laughed. And even though the environment and activism and work around that has always been my passion, I just thought that was a crazy career move for me because it didn't seem possible. But they were really persistent. And the lead at the time was Mark Gold, who is locally, regionally, and even throughout the state known as an incredible environmental activist and who's been very successful. And so then they had Mark call me, and he convinced me. He was optimistic with what we could do. He said, even if we got halfway there, you know, that would be such an incredible success. And wouldn't you want to be a part of that? And, you know, with enough conversations with the team up here, I was totally convinced, and I was really inspired by their optimism and inspired by their determination. And I mean, UCLA is a great place to be, and if anyone can do it, UCLA can help do that. And you know, in the end, we say, if you can do it in LA, you can do it anywhere.
Oh, I love that.
So anything we do accomplish here, I feel is really exportable to megacities across the globe. So I feel like the type of impact I'm able to have here is just immense and incredible and filled with opportunity. So that's really what inspired me was their enthusiasm and their optimism and I guess the potential that Los Angeles has.
I'm curious because you talked about working in Costa Rica, which is completely different to LA. So what did you learn in Costa Rica that you can kind of apply to Los Angeles?
I mean, it's very different and in many ways very similar in the sense that, as I mentioned, I'm a trained biologist. And so when I was in Costa Rica, I was able to apply my knowledge and my expertise in that space to establishing a local nature preserve that was this public-private venture. So in the end, that was really what was something I could take to this position was taking the academic work and my academic knowledge and then my ability to work with the community, to work with the local government, with the national government there, with the National Park Service. So I was involved in really an incredible public-private partnership. I had to learn Spanish on the job. So it's funny, I said, I've learned to translate, not just language, I've learned to translate across disciplines and across different types of communities and sectors and across different backgrounds. And that's exactly what you need to be successful in what we're doing here because, we're UCLA, we're an academic institution, we educate, we do research, and we do service. And in the end, you have to be able to translate what we're doing here into the real world, or we can't have the impact that we seek to have with this. So it really does all translate. It's incredible what I learned there and my experiences there, how they do translate to, an LA County, a place with 10 million people, when Costa Rica as a country, I think, has just about half of that. So,
wow.
But yeah, a lot of those experiences definitely translate.
So you've definitely gotten a lot of accomplishments professionally. Now, circling back to the UCLA UCLA Grand Challenge, what are some of the accomplishments you've gotten so far?
So when I started, it was back in 2014, and there's no roadmap for what we're doing. So to my knowledge, there was no other university who was really tackling grand challenges the way that we were. So they defined the grand challenge, with SMART goals. So they're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're relevant, and they're time bound. So we had these very specific goals that we were aiming to achieve. And so how do you even begin to do that? And how do you bring people together from engineering and arts and architecture and law school and policy and theater, film, and television, and how do you get them together and you talk about these problems because they're all approaching the problems, the similar types of problems, but from very different perspectives. And again, sort of speaking very different languages. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, my first major accomplishment was forming, sort of teams of folks from across those disciplines to come and have those conversations, which even though we were talking about the same problem, like let's say we're talking about how do we get to 100% renewable energy, well, someone in law and policy looks at that from a very different perspective than somebody in engineering who's looking for the technological solution. And so those were a lot of hard conversations to have. And in the end of those conversations, less than a year later, we came up with a 5-year work plan for the program that was really informed by folks from across disciplines. So that was really our first major accomplishment where we had this framework. And remember at the time, there was no city sustainability plan. There was no county sustainability plan. So we had sort of one of the first frameworks for how you might do this in LA County.
I was going to ask you about the report card.
Yeah. So we had at the time also developed and launched the first UCLA environmental report card, which tried to cover the different areas of sustainability in that very first one. That was back in 2015. And again, that was really an assessment of what's going on in the region, and nobody had ever done that before. So all of this sort of, snowballed into, okay, now the city's releasing their sustainability plan, their first one ever. And that was also in 2015. And then in 2019, many years later, the city released a revision, LA's Green New Deal. And then the county released their first sustainability plan, which we actually were contractors on developing. So another major accomplishment, 4 years later, we were part of the team, and a number of folks from across campus here at UCLA, I think there were almost 20 individuals who contributed directly to the development of the county's first sustainability plan, which was unanimously approved in 2019 by the Board of Supervisors. So that was really exciting. But it was a direct result of the work we had done in our work plan and then in our report cards. And those report cards that evaluated how the county is doing in these areas contributed to developing the targets and the goals that we have in that county plan. So after that first report card, we did one in energy and air quality. So we got a little bit more specific in what we were covering and went a little deeper. And then we released one in 2019 on water. And most recently, this month, we released one on ecosystem health.
So it's interesting because LA County got a C+ grade in this report. What are the implications?
So a C+, we always joke here at UCLA, is not a grade that would get you into UCLA, but it's not terrible. And I think it's actually it's a bit surprising for folks who think about LA. Again, you're thinking of the concrete jungle, and this is ecosystem health, which is really talking about the way that we as humans in this urban space are interacting with our biological community and the species in it, and the other physical aspects throughout the county, like wildfires and heat, and how that's impacting both biodiversity but also people. And so a C+ I thought was pretty good because, again, you think of the concrete jungle, but what a lot of people don't know, and honestly what I didn't know in moving up here to LA, was that over 65% of the land in LA County is natural area. And that just seems incredible. I mean, that's well over half. And so that's, again, like I mentioned, that provides us with a lot of opportunity and potential, but the thing is with that land is that only about 50% of it is protected. So, there's a lot of things we can do to improve that grade. We have a lot of threatened and endangered species here in LA. We are considered one of the world's global biodiversity hotspots, and the only one in the continental United States. And so this is a place that we need to protect and we need to restore, and I think be really mindful of the way we continue to urbanize, because undoubtedly we will continue to urbanize, and we expect more people to be here by 2050, and so how we decide to use the land and how we decide to place ourselves within this ecosystem, I think is really critical and really important right now.
You talked about wildfires, which is a big problem here in LA County. So I think approximately 21% of the area has a high risk of wildfires in LA.
Yes.
So what are the things that you suggest to try and somehow measure that, control that, improve that in the future?
Right. Well, I mean, there's things we can do to sort of mitigate wildfires, and that, of course, brings us back to we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So there's that much larger problem because we're seeing a lot of changes in our weather patterns. We have a lot of great research coming out of UCLA from Professor Alex Hall and his team have demonstrated that we will expect to see more high heat days. We expect to see different rain patterns. So not necessarily overall a decrease in the average amount of rain, but the way that the rain falls. So heavy rains followed by dry periods, which, as we know, are causing a lot of issues with our soil and our forests and really the greenness throughout the county. And so in the report card, we measured greenness, so vegetative greenness. And so we see that that's reducing. This is all contributing to the issues with wildfires. But with regard to adaptation, I mean, that 21% of the county that's near these very high fire hazard areas is home to, I think, almost 2 million.
I was going to say about 2 million
2 million Angelinos. And so with that many people, that's 20% of our population, really living in spaces and in homes that are at high risk of being affected by the wildfires. And so many people have already experienced the tragedy of what these wildfires can do. So I think it's important that, one, we have to rethink the way that we're building and or rebuilding in these spaces. We should be protecting natural areas and not continuing to move into them and creating risk for people. We need to think about the way we rebuild in those spaces for people who have lost their homes, and how do you do that in a way that provides more protection and resiliency for the building structures, the way that we manage the land and the trees, et cetera, around those spaces. But also the communities, really need the resources to develop adaptation plans and climate adaptation plans. And these plans must include the way that we think about wildfires. And there's a lot of nature-based solutions we can use to help, again, sort of adapt to what we're seeing here in Los Angeles in the last couple of years, which is a much longer and harsher wildfire season than we've ever seen before.
There's a lot of great ideas circulating here in UCLA, and you want to profit from that with the Stanford 2020 competition. What can you tell us about this initiative?
So we did the Sandpit 2020 competition last year.
I love the name Sandpit.
Right, and it really was to inspire the idea of kind of coming together and playing around. Let's kind of put our guards down and start thinking about ways we can tackle very specific types of problems we have here in LA County, and we left it quite open. The competition had to focus on tackling an issue that was identified in the city or county sustainability plans. They were required to take into consideration very meaningfully the place of equity and justice and access in the way that they were looking at solving these problems. But again, we invited folks from across disciplines here at UCLA. We were fortunate to have money from a donation from the Anthony and Jean Pritzker Family Foundation that we were able to use to entice these teams to come up together and really think big and not to be limited in the way that they were thinking about things. And so there was $1 million on the table. And we were super surprised to get 8 teams come together. And each team had, 6 to 10, 12 individuals. So we had a lot of different types of folks there, and a lot of people who we had almost never spoken to before. So a lot of new, fresh ideas. And several of the ideas were developed around, I think, the impacts of wildfire and of heat and of these things we're seeing as very real changes in the way that we walk around LA every day. And so it's having access to cooling centers, having access to other things you need during these high heat times, we saw this during the pandemic, having access to Wi-Fi, having access to the internet in order to fill out your application to even get your vaccination and or to get the food you need for your family. I mean, we saw all of these issues exacerbated, especially in the last year. So people were really excited to bring their ideas together to figure out how to solve them. So one of the project that won,
Heat Resilient LA.
Heat Resilient
I love
LA. That. We had folks from both inside and outside of UCLA that came together to judge the projects. So we really had some key stakeholders throughout the region who weighed in on what was needed most and what was the most innovative idea. And Heat Resilient LA rose to the top, and it's really an idea to take technology and develop sort of a cooling structure at places like a bus stop or places where folks gather, and then take the knowledge that we have about the gaps throughout the region where we don't have the tree canopy, we don't have the vegetation, we don't have the more natural cooling structures throughout the area. So combining this type of knowledge and then understanding again what the community wants and needs, like what do you need at that cooling structure? What is lacking for you, and what would be helpful in your community? What do you want it to look like? So that team rose to the top because it's solving such an important problem. I mean, one of the goals or targets in the county plan is to reduce the number of heat-related illnesses and visits to emergency departments. And they've actually been increasing the last couple of years. And so that's something we did find in the ecosystem health report card. So how do we provide the resources in the communities that need it the most so that people's health can improve and we don't see these types of emergency visits? So a lot of good stuff coming out of it.
Indeed, and I think that, if we were to, let's say, travel into the future, and so just imagine we're in 2050, what does the landscape look like if the Grand Challenge succeeds? 100%.
So, I mean, I think that's what we've been trying to do the last couple of years, is really reimagine what Los Angeles could be. And originally, the targets for our program were to transition to renewable energy, to source our water locally. As you may know, we source a majority of our water from outside of the region. And
so I've heard.
Right. I'm sure it's a hot topic that you've probably covered on this show. And also to enhance ecosystem health and human health and well-being. So what does that all mean coming together? I think we see a lot more community focus, and I think individualized community solutions. I think we see, we see a greater tree canopy throughout the region that matches the needs of both the community, but also the ecosystem there, or like the micro ecosystem. Because remember, in LA County, we have the beach, and we have cooler weather near the beach, and we have, the high mountains and almost everything in between. And so if you drive from West Los Angeles to East Los Angeles, you're changing temperature by 10 to 15 degrees in just 15, 20 minutes with no traffic. But I think with traffic too, I think we see we'll definitely see a lot more electrification with vehicles. We will see greater infrastructure for electric vehicles and other alternative fuel vehicles. I think we'll stop seeing, gas stations in every corner, and that will be replaced with other types of fueling stations. I think we see communities with parks and access to natural spaces for them to find cooling, to have, for recreation, for exercise, for resting. I think the communities will likely have a number of microgrids across the region to support renewable energy and that type of resource. We're going to have a lot more energy efficient, water efficient buildings. I think we'll probably see a little bit of densification, but a group here at UCLA did some work a couple of years ago, led by Tom Main out of Arts and Architecture, that was reimagining what we could look like as an urban space. And the idea there was, you could densify a very small percentage of Los Angeles County and keep the integrity of the sort of single family home and communities that we have here in Los Angeles at the same time. So if you just densify and kind of build up, he suggested, their team suggested, along the Wilshire corridor. If you just densify this one space, you can really leave the rest of LA kind of the way it is and the way that a lot of people love it. And so I don't think you need to sacrifice our communities and the way LA looks to people and feels to people in order to be more sustainable and to reach these goals. So
I think it's interesting that obviously sustainability affects everybody and impacts everybody, on so many different levels.
Yeah.
And I personally think about it as something that's outside there.
Yep.
And I think ignorance is the main roadblock. So how can we make something that sounds a little scary, like sustainability, more cool and trendy? I know you guys have a lot of programs going on right now.
So if there's one thing I learned in my work in Costa Rica, it was the way to, I think, achieve some of these environmental or sustainability goals is to identify in the community what makes it relevant to them. And it's going to be different in every community. So I learned quickly that if your number one struggle is to, you know, feed your family, you're not thinking about, right? You're not thinking about maybe recycling or, you know, these other things that individuals can do and families can do. But at the same time, there are a lot of things that, of course, save money, make things more efficient. We need to make that more accessible, I think, to all families and all communities. And the way to engage, I think with the young people, I think they are engaged. So my experience in working here at UCLA, but also I have children of my own, is that this is something they care about. This is something, you know, this is their planet long after we're gone. And I see a lot of inspiration and I think commitment to the idea of sustainability. So it's maybe more our generation that needs to think about it in a different way. But if you can connect with folks and you can identify, you know, where it impacts them and how it affects them and how it can improve their quality of life, you just need to find that piece for every different type of individual, right? So that's where the social sciences and that's where the humanities and that's where the arts come in, and that's where they are just such critical pieces and components of the way that we're looking at this. So how can you engage folks? I mean, you can engage them through art, you can engage them through dance, you can engage them through theater, and in a number of other ways. But we also have some student programs, and this campus is just full of so many students with incredible interest in sustainability. And we developed an undergraduate research scholars program that its intention was to be teaching the students about exactly what we're trying to do with the Grand Challenge. Like, how do you tackle a Grand Challenge, and how do you become prepared to do that, and how do you go into the real world and work with people who are different than you and who come from a different discipline than you, think about things differently than you. So we created a space for them to have that experience while they were still in their early years of education here at UCLA. So this program has been going on for 7 or 8 years now, and it really has engaged students from, you know, dance majors, English majors, engineering majors, biology, and they're all in the classroom together. They have a group research experience where they intentionally work with folks from different disciplines, and they work on a real sustainability problem. So either something specific to the campus, they've done things off campus, so they develop a number of projects that have real impact in that moment, and they can see sort of the impact they're having. And it's inspiring, I think, for the students. It's inspiring for, you know, the folks outside that they're working with, right? For the clients who they're working with, and many of them go on to continue to work in the space, get their, you know, change their major, and realize that sustainability is for everybody. Sustainability isn't just for an engineer, right? There are a ton of amazing technological solutions that we need and that we're developing here, but that isn't going to solve the problem. This is a human problem, and
we all need to stay engaged and connected.
Exactly.
This was great, Cassie. Thank you so much for sharing all this very valuable information about sustainability and talking about the UCLA Sustainable LA Grand Challenge. So if people are interested, they can visit the website. And is there like a Twitter account, social media?
Yes, so you can follow us on Twitter at UCLA Sustain LA.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for planting the seeds to transform LA into the world's most sustainable megacity by 2050.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Cassie. This was Natalia Wow for LA Currents. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day and stay safe.